video shouldn't exist. And yet there it was. The terminal screen flickered, shifting between static and distorted fragments of an impossibly familiar broadcast. At first, only abstract shapes moved through the digital grain, an irregular flow of shadows and light. But then the image stabilized and I saw myself. Ice shot through my veins. On the screen I was sitting exactly where I was now. Same room, same bluish lighting, same trembling screen in front of me. I blinked. He blinked too. But it wasn't a reflection. My heart pounded against my ribs. I barely noticed when Ramirez, the communications engineer, leaned over the terminal beside me. "What the hell is this?" he murmured, eyes wide. No one answered. Everyone in Aurora Station's control room was frozen, as if any movement might shatter the fragile barrier between us and that thing on the screen. Ramirez frantically typed commands, trying to trace the source of the signal. Is this an echo of the live feed? Some server interference? No one responded. The video didn't make sense. I was there, but I was also here. I searched for explanations. A glitch in the monitoring systems? A delay in the internal feed? But something was wrong. Wrong in a way my brain struggled to process. The me on the screen didn't just look static. It looked aware, and then it moved first. I hadn't moved. A muscle, but on the screen it tilted its head slightly as if listening to something. As if realizing we were watching. Ramirez muttered something, his voice faltering. This can't be. The other me's mouth opened slowly, but there was no sound. Only his lips moving, forming silent words. Ramirez went even paler. He's saying something. The room fell into complete silence. We all tried to decipher what it meant. My mind worked quickly, recognizing the pattern of mouth movements. And then, suddenly, it clicked. He was repeating the same phrase. Don't let him in. Don't let him in. Don't let him in. My stomach churned. This can't be a system error, I murmured. Ramirez ran a trembling hand down his face. I checked the logs. This signal isn't coming from outside the station. I turned to face him, feeling a lump in my throat. What do you mean? He swallowed hard and pointed at the screen displaying the transmission data. This video, it's being broadcast from inside the station. My body went rigid. That doesn't make sense. Before Ramirez could respond, the lights flickered. For a second, the room plunged into darkness, and when the light returned, I saw it. In the screen's reflection on the glass, someone was standing behind me. Panic clenched my chest like a closing fist. I spun around instantly, my heart hammering in my ears. Nothing. The control room was exactly as before. The other engineers were there, just as tense as I was. The air was thick, heavy with an unbearable silence. But Ramirez had seen it too. His eyes were wide, his fingers gripping the terminal so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. You saw it, didn't you? My voice came out hoarse. He swallowed hard. There was someone. Behind you. The room felt colder, much colder than before. The transmission was still playing on the screen. The other me smiled, and then the image began to move on its own. He stood up from the chair. We froze. The me on the screen, who had been motionless before, was now moving independently. He stood up slowly, never breaking eye contact with the camera. But something was wrong. The way he moved wasn't natural. It was as if he were testing his own muscles, as if he were learning how to move. Ramirez let out a strangled sound. This is a feed error. It can't be live. But we knew it was. The me on the screen took a step forward, then another. He started walking toward the camera, toward us, and then the screen went black. A single warning flashed on the terminal. Transmission established. Origin unknown. The control room's automatic door slid open by itself, and someone stepped in. The air turned cold. The sound of the automatic door sliding open blended with the suffocating silence of the control room. Every muscle in my body tensed. No one moved. Someone had entered. Ramirez let out a shaky breath. He felt it too. The presence. Slowly I turned my head. The door had slid open only a few inches, a narrow gap in the dimly lit corridor. The flickering emergency light cast irregular shadows on the wall. But there, in the darkness, I saw a pair of bare feet. My heart nearly stopped. Ramirez's breathing grew heavy. "There's someone there," he whispered. The silence on the other side of the door was absolute, but we knew we weren't wrong. The thing was there, watching us. The terminal behind us beeped. Ramirez jumped and turned toward the screen. His face drained of color. The feed is back. The once black screen was now displaying the video again. But something had changed. The me in the transmission was no longer in the chair. The camera now showed our exact perspective, as if we were being filmed at that very moment. Me and Ramirez motionless, staring at the half-open door. Someone was holding the camera on the other side. A tingling sensation spread through my fingers, a primal fear crawling up my spine. Ramirez frantically typed on the keyboard, "I'm shutting this shit down right now." But before he could do anything, the terminal changed screens on its own. A single line of text flickered against the black background. "Do not close your eyes." The automatic door slid open a little more, and then the feet disappeared. Ramirez let out a strangled sob. He stood up and started backing away from the door. "This isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right." The control room was small, there was nowhere to go. He stumbled over one of the chairs and nearly fell. "We need to get out of here, now." But I couldn't move, because at that moment, a voice whispered in my ear. Not from outside, from behind me. "You're in his place now." A shiver ran so violently down my spine that my muscles locked up. I turned slowly. No one was there. But Ramirez was staring at me. His face was as pale as paper. His eyes were wide, locked onto something I couldn't see. "Man," his voice broke. "Your reflection isn't moving." My lungs stopped working for a second. I swallowed hard and, with every fiber of my body begging me not to, I looked at the security monitor beside us. The camera was pointed at us. And he was right. I was there, but I wasn't moving. The other version of me in the reflection on the glass was completely still. His eyes locked directly onto mine. Then he smiled, and he blinked at me. Ramirez screamed and grabbed my arm. "Get out now." He ran to the door and yanked it open. I followed, my heart pounding against my ribs. The corridor was dark, lit only by the emergency lights. A warning flickered on the digital wall display. "Secondary power failure, Zone 04, lockdown protocol, reinitializing." A strange noise echoed through the station. Footsteps, not just one pair. Many. Ramirez turned to me, panting. "Where to?" I tried to think, but my mind was a blur of fear. Then, a metallic sound echoed from the far end of the corridor. A dry click. The sound of a door unlocking. "Something is opening the doors," Ramirez whispered, and then we heard it. Not a scream, not a cry for help, but a whisper coming from the end of the corridor, from a place where no one should be. "Don't let him in," the same warning from the transmission. My stomach twisted. Ramirez gripped my shoulder, trembling. "What do we do?" I didn't know. But before I could answer, the lights went out completely, and in the absolute darkness, we heard someone breathing. Very close. Total darkness. The breathing wasn't mine. It wasn't Ramirez's. There was someone else there. The air was thick, heavy with humidity, as if something invisible was exhaling over us. Ramirez trembled beside me. "Who's there?" His voice broke. He swallowed hard. "Who the hell is there?" Silence swallowed everything. Then, a click. Something moved in the dark. Very close. I felt it, even without seeing. A shift in the air, a presence that shouldn't be there. And then something cold touched the back of my neck. A shiver paralyzed my spine. My instincts screamed for me to run, but I couldn't move. The touch wasn't human. It was like something trying to understand the shape of my skin. Ramirez let out a strangled scream, and everything exploded into chaos. The emergency light flickered back on, but it was intermittent, and in the brief moments between flashes, we saw it. There was no flesh. The thing was a shadow of me, a perfect silhouette. The same height, the same broad shoulders, but no eyes, no mouth, nothing, just a black mold, a husk that shouldn't exist. Ramirez didn't hesitate. He grabbed my arm and ran. I stumbled, nearly falling, but forced myself to follow. The lights flickered again. The shadow was gone. Or worse, it was now ahead of us, standing, waiting. Ramirez yanked out a radio with shaking hands. "This is Ramirez. Can anyone hear me? We have a problem. Static, hissing, and a single response. I'm listening." The voice was mine. Ramirez gasped, shutting off the radio as if it was burning his hands. I pulled him to the side of the corridor. "We have to get out of here." The hallway split into 3 directions. To the left, the living quarters. Small, narrow. To the right, the server room, the heart of the station. Straight ahead, the cafeteria. A wide, open space where we'd be more exposed. Ramirez gripped my shoulder, eyes wide. "Where to?" Tick, tick, tick. A dripping sound echoed through the station. I looked up, and I saw it. The shadow was on the ceiling. It had no face. And yet, it was smiling. "Run!" I screamed. We chose the right server room. The metal floor trembled beneath our feet. Ramirez slammed his hand against the security door and typed the emergency code. The lock didn't open. Beep, access denied. No. No, no, no! I pounded my fists against the door. The shadow was coming. Ramirez's radio turned on by itself. Static filled the air. And then, the voice. My voice. "I warned you." The lights flickered. The shadow vanished, but it wasn't gone. It was now between us. For a second, time stopped. Ramirez was beside me. But I could feel something was different. And then he grabbed my arm. And I knew. That wasn't Ramirez. My stomach twisted. My legs nearly gave out. My brain refused to accept it. But something was wrong with him. His face, it was too perfect. His eyes were too focused, his breathing, off. He didn't blink. Shock left me frozen. "Man," my voice came out weak. "Are you okay?" Ramirez smiled, but he never smiled like that. "Of course, friend." His voice was too calm, too slow, too fake, and then he did something impossible. He blinked. But I heard it. A sound. A wet sound. Like his eyelids were dry on the inside, like there was something wrong with the flesh. My mind screamed, "Run!" But my muscles were frozen with fear, and that's when I saw it. The real Ramirez. Behind the creature. His face was white, his eyes filled with pure terror. He shook his head frantically and mouthed without sound, "That's not me." The fake Ramirez smiled wider and stepped toward me. It wasn't Ramirez. The man standing in front of me looked like Ramirez. He spoke like him, but he wasn't him. And I knew that the moment I heard the wet sound of his eyelids blinking. "Friend," he whispered. The thing that looked like Ramirez was waiting for me to believe. But the real Ramirez was still there. Behind him. Looking at me, pale, trembling, mute with horror. The creature took another step. And then, the real Ramirez disappeared. Simply vanished. As if he had never been there. I swallowed hard. My stomach twisted. The false Ramirez smiled wider. And then something impossible happened. The radio on my belt turned on by itself. Static hissed, and a voice whispered from within, "He is in my skin." The sound came from inside my own body. Something was touching me, something invisible crawling inside me, testing the shape of my bones. My eyes burned, my skin itched from the inside, and I understood. I was starting to change too. No, no, no. The thing took one last step toward me, so close I could smell its breath, exactly like mine, and then it spoke. "Do you think you're still you?" My mind shattered. I ran. I screamed. I ran. I pounded on the door until my fingers hurt. And this time, it opened. I hurled myself down the corridor, my thoughts a whirlwind. What was that? Did Ramirez still exist? Did I still exist? Or was it already too late for both of us? The corridor stretched beyond what it should. Every door I passed looked wrong. The numbers on the plaques flickered as if they were just an overlaid reflection. The station is changing. My lungs burned. I didn't know where to run, but then I saw something. A window. One of the panoramic windows that overlooked the void of space. I needed to see what was out there. Maybe there was still a ship. Maybe I still had a way to escape. Maybe I was still alive. I ran to the glass. My whole body trembled. I looked. And finally, I understood the truth. The Aurora station was no longer in orbit. It wasn't anywhere. Outside, there was only an immense darkness, and in the darkness, something was looking back. It had no shape, no beginning, no end. It was infinite and aware, and it knew that I was seeing it. My brain refused to comprehend. My eyes tried, but whatever it was, it could not truly be seen. It was a thing, or it was all things. And then it started to reflect. My own eyes, my own teeth. My skin, stripped from me, but still smiling. My reflection in the glass no longer followed me, and then it blinked, and I heard it. The wet sound, from inside my head. My mouth opened on its own, and a voice that wasn't mine whispered from within. I warned you. The transmission never came from outside. It had always come from within, me. And then the thing inside the glass laughed, and I felt something behind me, something that had my shape, but wasn't me anymore. The thing behind me was me. I knew it without having to turn around. I knew it by the way it breathed. I knew it because its presence fit perfectly into the exact space I should have occupied. I knew it because it already knew everything I was about to think. And above all, I knew it because I was no longer myself. I trembled, but it didn't. The thing that was me moved closer until I could feel the exact warmth of my own skin. I heard the wet sound of eyelids blinking. Then it whispered in my ear, "If you can't prove you're you, then are you still?" And that question destroyed me, because I didn't know the answer. I didn't know if I was still real. My body no longer felt quite right. My voice inside my head sounded different. My thoughts had a slight delay. As if someone was rewriting me. No, 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 I needed to get out of there. I forced myself to run, but my body didn't move. Whatever was imitating me had taken control. I could still see through the glass. I could still see the thing outside, looking at me. And I realized the terrible mistake I had made. The transmission. It was never just a warning. It was never a distress call. It wasn't telling me to run. It was preparing me to accept. The Aurora station never existed. The crew never existed. I never existed, not in the way I thought. The transmission is me. I am what it has always been. I am the next echo. Just a reflection of a copy of a copy of a copy. And someone before me has been through this. Someone before me discovered the truth too late. And now it was my turn. I saw my reflection. And this time it didn't smile. This time it looked at me with pity. Then it spoke. And I understood what would happen now. It's your turn to call the next one. And then the screen went dark. The station vanished. Time vanished. I vanished. But the transmission always continues.